first of all, of course, it's necessary to highlight the fact that all our difficulties are because of what we call mind. And we have that phrase, mind over matter. I don't mind and you don't matter. But what we mean, of course, by mind, we have to understand that there are essentially two types of approaches to this subject. The one approach is to think that the mind is purely physical. The way in which you deal with the world is the same way that you view yourself. So if you view yourself as a physical entity, then the world for you will be purely physical. That is why we have materialism, which essentially says if you want the answer to any problem, you have to look to matter. Despite the fact that matter, according to our modern, not necessarily modern science, I mean, it's science going back over 100 years, there is no such thing. And the great genius Einstein, Albert Einstein, declares this because he reduces everything really to energy. But what kind of energy? It must be potential energy. So we can go along that line and we can say we can reduce everything to energy then. And so there is an analysis which is going on in the Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is starting off with an elimination process. So, am I the body? No. On the basis that it is a changing thing, it's made from material, and I'm looking for something that is permanent, unchanging, something that is enduring. When I say I exist, that I cannot change. It can observe various changes. Clearly, it's not in this assembly of parts called the body. And then the next layer will be this energy. And Einstein is registering everything to that energy. But we cannot stop there because it is also of a material nature, just in subtle form. And thought, really, is the subtlest energy of all. But fortunately, we're in a commanding position and we're able to control that. But what happens when we feel we cannot control it? When we feel all these events are overwhelming us, and then the mind is going off in various directions, and when we sit down for meditation, the mind cannot focus. Now, this word focus I don't like, because focus means something like playing a note on a musical instrument over and over and over again. There has to be enormous variety within the process, the overall process of meditation. So let's throw in some standard definitions, which you probably already know already because I've told you before. And let us see if we can say that meditation falls into two categories. One is the category of the impersonal, the unmanifest. The other is in the category of devotion. I'm going to deal with that aspect of meditation called devotional meditation, because that's the most commonly practiced. Now, meditation applicable to Buddhism and so on doesn't have that. It has really a question of mindfulness. But all of meditation is really to do with taking your attention and willingly, consciously directing it in a certain way with a sporting attitude, with a let-go attitude, with an attitude that is not forced. So the first thing we have to understand, both in our life and in meditation, is this one obstacle from which everything else comes, including anger and so on, is really due to egoism. And when I say egoism, it means an identification with an embodied person called I. As long as that is there, all the other problems will come from it. That is why we do the personal development course called the Enneagram and Essence of Truth, because we put on these various layers. One layer we've discovered from the Taittiriya Upanishad, they call it sheaths, kosha. One is the physical, made from food. That's its material. We don't often think of it like that, but if you carefully understand it, physiology and so on, you see that we only get our energy from material, which is unlike with the resultant material. In other words, I feed in some bread in my mouth. Let's say for breakfast, it's absolutely delicious, and I don't think about it again. Something is beautifully converting it through a kind of manufacturing process into energy. And so that energy aspect is there throughout the entire body. Taittiriya Upanishad puts it as our second kosha, and it is made from energy, and it is distributed in a fivefold way. But obviously, we are not energy. And in Raja Yoga, there's a whole chapter on psychic energy, psychic prana. That, in other words, thought. So how to control this subtle series of waves is not an easy matter, and the whole of all the scriptures really is designed and orientated toward this control. And in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, they're completely to do with the subject of meditation. Then Arjuna gives this complaint, which is all of our complaints, and saying, I don't, the mind is very difficult to control. It's like and Krishna also agrees. He says yoga is hard to attain, that is, concentration is hard to contain. He admits it, by a person who cannot control himself. But it can be attained by him who has controlled himself, but who strives by the right means. So that is asamyatatmana yogo dusprapa iti me matihi. Now that's in answer, of course, to a comment. He says, this yoga of evenness of mind, concentration, and so on, I don't see how it can be kept up because of restlessness. And that's really what we're dealing with, is restlessness. Restlessness in the mind. Where does the restlessness come from? The restlessness comes from the subtle area underneath, which we call the unconscious mind. Now, I said there are two kinds of approaches to this. One approach says that the mind is, or thought, consciousness, in other words, is simply an epiphenomena, a byproduct of a physical thing called brain. That's the materialist point of view, by people who think that they themselves are nothing more than physical. If you think you are physical, you will have a physical world. If you think that you are a psychological being, then the world becomes a world of ideas, and all the problems have to be dealt on that level. If, on the other hand, you think that you are pure spirit and you know it, then everything is viewed as spirit. The whole world is viewed as spirit. And so all this spiritual practice, including meditation, will be an attempt to go from the physical, even step by step, to the energetic, and from the energetic to the mental, and from the mental to the blissful, and from the blissful to the actuality of pure spirit. And when we have found that, even just for a moment, and increasing those moments time after time, we get the full vision. Can there be dryness in meditation? Yes. Can there be a series of events external to this unit called I that affect the mind severely? Yes. Well, how do we practically deal with it? The two are connected. So the one way is to say consciousness is a product of materiality. The other one is to say that consciousness comes from a deep, deep area of thinker and knower, a witness. Again, we are referring to Taittiriya Upanishad. That thinker, knower, witness is what devotional life religion calls God. How do we get close to that being? We cannot sit and think that all of a sudden we will bring God out of the closet, or we will bring some ideas out, or we'll follow the set instructions and get something. No, something else has to be added, namely feeling. Even in the impersonal meditation, the non-dualistic meditation, for example, a qualification for successful spiritual life will be thirst, hankering, a yearning for freedom. Ramakrishna gives that example of the student who gets taken to the water, body of water, a lake, and answer the question, when will I know that I get some kind of revelation? And the teacher, not answering verbally, takes the student for a dip and plunges the student into the water until the student is gasping and thrashing and comes out. How did you feel? I thought I was going to die. I was desperate for air, desperate for air. When that desperation is the same for truth or freedom or God, these are synonymous terms. One is devotional language, the other is not. Then you know that realization is about to dawn. So we have to practice patiently and admit that there will be dry days and there will be nicely nourished days. And we have to make sure that we're not just following a routine, either in the area of prayer or in the area of attitudes. Now we have to then ensure that what we look out on is not physical, not energetic, not mental, but is pure spirit. I think if you read today's thought, and I'll read it out just to make the point. Some step to seventh floor, that is the highest state. There to stay unending. Some climb up and down to lower floors descending. Playful and adoring glances, calling to enchanting Lord, whose lips play sweet on flute, in settings pastoral is adored. When we look at, or when we hear sounds, when we see endearing objects, for example, it's easy to have playful and adoring glances to the Lord who sits behind it. And we have to use our imagination, but the clues are there in the physical. The eyes sparkle, they're not dull. And we know where attention deviates. I was telling a group, I think it was last Saturday probably, Sunday, sorry, no, Saturday, last Saturday. So I correct, it was last Sunday. But I was telling people about public speaking, and I was saying if you have a large audience there, you look out, it's to your advantage just to see a hazy sea of faces. But you'll notice if you divide the audience into two, on the left hand, there will be an absolute look of attention from somebody. Their eyes will be alert. Their gaze will be absolutely captivated. It's easy to see when somebody is listening. But we also have to acknowledge that human attention span is quite limited. And so why divide the audience into two? Because on the other side, there'll be somebody also enthusiastic, but soon they'll go off to the Bahamas or something. And then you come back to the other side and you catch their attention until they also go off. And then you look on the other side, oh, you've come back, welcome back. And this capacity for us to hold our attention depends on our level of enthusiasm. It is easy for people to sit in a concert, and they paid money for it, for 4 or 5 hours and not shift. They are so engaged, so entertained. One of the reasons I give for the decline of interest and enthusiasm in religion in general, in Europe, let's say, is because there is a lot of entertainment. There is something that will entertain the eyes and the ears and the kinesthetics. And always you'll find, just walking down the street, somebody you're liable to literally bump into because they're looking down at their phone. On public transport, everybody is looking at their phones. Children are becoming highly insular. Now, it could be to our advantage where attention is deliberately steered in a certain direction, but in all likelihood, you'll find a hopping mind. You'll find a mind which is fully disturbed. And it's important for us to notice this disturbance coming up and the source of it. And we have the option, we have the freedom, where possible, to avoid any disturbances. I don't mean that we should withdraw into our cave or withdraw into a room and never engage in any social interaction. But what social interaction is a meeting with none other than the divine, the Lord of the universe, or the Mother of the universe, whichever you like to call it, giving it an anthropomorphic understanding and a feeling of the divine presence. That has to be there always. And so that really is kind of control. So mind is restless. Yes, fine. We understand it. But children are also restless. But well-behaved children are disciplined by the parents by various short-term methods. Reward, punishment would be short-term method, or threats, or whatever it is. But the long-term thing would be encouragement. We have to encourage the mind. There are certain songs like that by saints. Those who know Tyagaraja, for example, you'll find one song addressed to the mind. Oh, my mind. He's responding to an invitation from a king. Oh, my mind. Which do you want? You've been invited to a sumptuous feast by a king, or do you want the bliss of the divine, the bliss of the divine presence? What do you want? On the one hand, you can weigh it up. You'll have a feast. It'll finish. Your stomach will be filled, but soon you'll have to refill it. And so the taste will be good, but you'll want some more. Or the unending bliss of divine nectar, which is never exhausted. Which would I like to plunge myself into? Another song will be one which Naran sang for Ramakrishna, Manu Chalo, it's called, Bengali song. And it's again addressed to the mind. Oh, my mind, like a kindly aunt or uncle. Oh, my mind, why do you dwell in a foreign land? Why don't you go home? But of course, be aware. There will be robbers on your journey. There will be robbers on the way. These robbers will be in terms of desired objects, greed, anger, hatred, jealousy, so many. These will rob you. They'll rob you of your freedom. But fortunately, there are good rest houses on the way. I like to think that when you join me here, even on Zoom, it's a good rest house for you. It will give you some impetus for the next, maybe the next few kilometers. Then you may need a top up, another thing. Like kicking a football up, it'll come down. You have to kick it up again until you see the habit of kicking it up is spontaneous. All of this is really developing a habit. And we have to be practical about it. We have to avoid the areas where we react, the robbers. And the robbers come in terms of people, places, and events. But the real robber is not there outside you. It's inside. The robbers are within you. Jealousy is within you. You can't go to the supermarket, even on a Black Friday, and get a cup of jealousy. No, it's already there inside you. And it comes in a layer which we don't normally notice until it bubbles up into the conscious area, the conscious mind. And most people, unfortunately, when we say self-control, it means we never noticed those things bubbling up. As soon as we notice the beginning of it bubbling up, we have to apply a formula. What is that formula? That formula is that given the fact that there is a kind of journey, a kind of train before us, a flow of time, we know that the next second and the next second, the next second is unoccupied and is subject for us to put something in of our own deliberately. Something that has the characteristic of sattva, knowing that the old friends that come up are relegated to these two categories: self-interest, from which all these other emotions arise, or dullness. And we can observe these two categories of things and see, which category is this coming in? And we never ever use a technique of suppression. We always allow it to come. Let it come, but know where it's coming from. And it's probably coming from deep down into your childhood or something, or even a previous life. These are called samskaras. And let them come. Don't repress them. Welcome them as friends. You're part of my overall habit level, psyche. But I'm busy reforming this because I have new friends. I have new adventures. I have new companions. And these are all the high values. And because all the things which are disturbing ourselves bring us to what Patanjali calls verbal delusion. It means we imagine something and then we get hooked into that imagination and we nurture it. Why do we nurture it? We nurture it because this trap of I am an embodied physical entity comes in. We call it egoism, mixing the seer with the seen. Patanjali Yoga Sutras gives us this definition. What is egoism? It is mixing up the seer, the deep seer, the witness, with the object that is being seen, and the mind itself is an object. If the mind is an object and we are the subject, then we can carefully handle it with a kind of sense of humor. Playing the game, as I call the game of guiding thought, introducing wherever we see a negative, overwhelmingly put in positives. And that really is what is called self-control. Yes, the mind, Arjun complains, is restless. It's turbulent. It's strong. It's obstinate. We admit all these things. But we have no business to complain about it. We simply acknowledge that's its nature. Like a child that is not disciplined, or an animal that is not disciplined. It seems to me as hard to control as the wind, he says. Well, let's go back then to this thought which I had up here. So, he made a homely dwelling in every field and heart, presented as all living things, as every quarter, every part. Does a meditator meet his God only when his eyes are closed? It's a question. How can he not meet him all around, as all sights and sounds disclosed? The clues are all there. Lord, you are standing there. Did I acknowledge it? You're standing there as a person. You're also standing there as an opportunity that I valued as some kind of scene. You stand there as an event, as a series of changes. And so the prayer is very telling. And this prayer can be used in meditation. O Lord, I see thy beaming face as the sun, thy cooling eye of the moon, the swift feet in the flight of birds, thy loyal faith in ground, thy whispering words in breeze, infinite grace as sea. In every living being, it is only thee and thee and thee. So this is a prayer. I might say it's a beautiful prayer, but you might think that's a little egoistic. But it's not, because it doesn't come from me. It comes in me, within me, and came out. And because of this connection in meditation, all these things can come out. So we have to remind ourselves constantly and make the adjustment constantly. We cannot let it slide for a moment. There's no holiday for it. It's an eternal game of guiding thought and should not be stressful. It should be a pleasant activity. So what is Sri Krishna's reply to this objection? Look, I don't see how we can control it because it's really very obstinate. It goes here, goes there, it goes everywhere. So Sri Bhagavan Vacha, what does he say? He said, yes, I agree. The mind is restless. It's hard to control, but by practice and non-attachment, it can be controlled. By practice and non-attachment. What is meant by these two things? We have to constantly practice this identification of the wave that comes momentarily in the mind and threatens to dominate it. And anything that is to do with the past that is negative, or the future that contains anxiety, we immediately put it in the registration of, my dear fellow, this is all to do with rajas, it is all to do with tamas. It is all to do with my sense of feeling embodied, either in the past or right now. Right now, no doubt. And the fact that it's not going to change in the future, no, it can change. This is the conviction that the things of the future are the product of what we think right now, at this particular moment. And so why not fill the mind up with delights? Because there are so many opportunities to look around and register the glories of the divine. That is why so much attention is paid in scriptures about the glory of the divine. We see it in here, we see it in there. I gave some examples. We see it in the sun, we see it in the moon. You know, when we do the Surya Namaskar as a kind of warm-up, if you will, to Hatha Yoga asanas and practices, it's not just a quaint thing to do. We can think in the morning, oh, the sun is here, let us make our salutation. Let us do it with feeling. I know that some of you may be familiar with sun salutations that are being done by a particular person, a nice teacher in Gretz in France, and how that person engages this feeling in you. So we should take advantage of all these moments. And morning and evening are the ideal times. Sri Ramakrishna states, he says, the morning and the evening easily is conducive for the promotion or experience of sattva. What is sattva? Sattva implies truth, purity, goodness, love, harmony, all these qualities that do not have this I interest, this egocentricity involved. And in other words, this identification with, this is my body and this is my world. No, I am a thinker, I'm a knower, I'm a witness. And all of us are essentially thinkers where we can shift our attention at will. We do it automatically in areas where we're entertained or areas where we're interested. And the attention is immediately engaged in these things. So what do we have to do? We have to make our meditations and our background to it, our prerequisite to it, our bulk of the day. We have to fill it with joy. We have to fill it with love. We have to observe correctly the nature of what's in front of us and the nature of the equipment that we have, which is the same material as the objects. And we have to feel the emotion of love and joy and thankfulness. That's possible. Supposing we're able to do it for a few moments and then extend it to a few minutes, extend it to a few hours, and then finally extend it to wherever we go, whatever we're doing. The joy of work, for example. The joy of work is there. The joy of engaging energy in a directed pursuit, manifesting the free gift of energy that comes out through the physical body and comes out through the subtle activity of the mind. All thought is sacred, all matter is sacred, all energy is sacred, because if you have an eye to see it, it all dissolves into pure spirit. So, asamyat atmana yogo dushprapa iti me matihi. Yoga is hard to attain. Concentration is hard to attain by a person who cannot control himself. That's what we require. But it can be attained by that person who has controlled themselves and who strives by the right means. So now we have to find out what are the right means. No amount of practice is of any good. I'm talking here specifically about meditation practice practice of japa, if there's no feeling that goes with it. If it's mechanical, it has no use. It might form a nice habit and so on, and it might be mindless, like getting up in the morning, washing the face, brushing the teeth, something like that. And at one point, we can do the brushing and think of other things, many other things. But even then, we have to be, when nothing is occupying the mind specifically, that is the moment where the robbers will come out. Oh, my mind, why do you dwell in a foreign land? And in that whole story, on your journey, there will be robbers. Expect them, wait for them, but understand that the neutralizing factors will be there. We can avoid them. Once we know they're there, we avoid them. And we have great tools with us. What is the tool? The tool is the companionship of the divine with whom we walk. So, is there any counter to that? He who is unable to control himself, whose mind wanders away from this yoga, this concentration, though possessed of faith, what end does the person meet? In other words, I see the problem, but you know what? I might be imperfect in this practice. What is my fate? And then the Lord gives us great assurance. Even before that, we would expect meditation instructions where there is a chapter dedicated to the subject of meditation itself. But we don't find it. First of all, we find that the word sannyas is used. And it means renouncing for the craving for the results of actions. That is the disturbing element in the mind. I do something and I'm thinking of the result. If I think of the result in the future, my stability here and now is gone. It may be filled with tremendous doubt, tremendous anxiety, tremendous fear, or it might be an activity which will bring me some personal reward, physical, mental, whatever it is, but still the wrong identification is there and will therefore end in pain and sorrow ultimately, or at least lack of fulfillment. So craving makes the mind unsteady. If you ask, why is my mind unsteady? It is because there is craving. There is a thirst, there's a desire. And what we want to cultivate is a thirst, a desire for God, or a thirst or a desire for the truth. You can express it in different ways. And so, in this chapter on meditation, Krishna the teacher, and Arjuna the student, we have to understand they are both military men. And that means they're right there in the thick, in the battlefield. They're not monks in a retreat. So this term sannyasa does not mean monks or nuns in a retreat. Cravings can be for sense objects in this world, or they can be for subtler enjoyments in the next, in heaven. We had a wonderful talk by our local priest here at a kind of carol event. They call it a service, but really it's carols. And so the local priest gave a beautiful example, gave a beautiful talk on love, the theme of love, and so on. And then brings in the theological, and when we all meet in heaven. So that's fine, but from our philosophy point of view, heaven is just a holiday camp, So it depends what you mean. Now, if by heaven you mean we don't meet anybody, we are there in the glory of basking in the divine sunshine, of divine grace, then that would be a wonderful heaven. So both kinds of pleasure must be given up, not only the pleasure for here and now, but the pleasure for after. And cravings are a seeker's real enemy. These are the robbers. So we must raise ourselves above them by our own efforts. And intellectual knowledge, and that is what it's really stating in the 6th chapter. And any intellectual knowledge of the self, that is the divine self, the God within, must be followed by actual realization And that dawns by itself. So the illumined person is beyond the sway of what we can call hot and cold opposites. There are physical opposites, there are also mental opposites. And these can be summarized in the physical sense, and they can be summarized in the psychological arena as honor, dishonor, somebody praises us, or somebody tells some kind of scandal against us or untruth against it, whatever it is. We should not be disturbed by it, ideally. And that's what we should try to balance all the time. Gain and loss, all of these are what we call pairs of opposites. And it's extended, of course. Friends, enemies, the holy, the unholy. These are all in the field of values. If there are people, supposing there are people who clearly are against me and try to destroy me and so on, what should I do? Should I fight them back? Or should I, as a fully person who sees things in a very different way, should I rather feel compassion and say, you're going to suffer for this? No, but let me be generous enough to take your suffering on me. I'll take your karma. That kind of idea. So this poetic description of these pairs of opposites are compared like a lump of clay, if you like, or a stone or a piece of gold. The characteristics of a perfect person have to be kept in mind, and we have many examples of it. The lives of saints, the lives of these incarnations, a Jesus, a Buddha, a Ramakrishna, etc. These are all examples. When Swami Vivekananda wandered the length and breadth of India, 2 books he carried with him, Bhagavad Gita and Imitation of Christ. And the Imitation of Christ is saying, and both are imitating. Krishna is providing a wonderful example by his teachings and examples, and the Imitation of Christ is taking a perfected entity and saying, let me imitate such a person. Early in the Bhagavad Gita, the question is asked, this person of steady wisdom, Sthita Prajna, how do they walk? What kind of thing do they say? We can extend it. What do they eat? How do they think, mainly? How do they behave? Are they full of service to all? Should we take these lives of saints and study them well and then be inspired by them? So for the sake of practice, of course, we can resort to a secluded and congenial place for meditation, no doubt. And there, seated alone, we should then patiently bring our attention back to the glory of the self. And as often as it strays in different directions, we shouldn't be worried about it. We should say, give a limited freedom, all right, come back. And we come back to a journey that we are taking the mind on. And the journey can be from a scriptural passage. The journey can be from a memory of a wonderful event where we felt happy and peaceful. A memory could be from a pilgrimage. A memory could be from a saintly person, could be from components of a talk such as this. Whatever it is, we can take that as a theme and take our attention on a wonderful, delightful adventure. And wherever the attention strays, we allow that limited freedom, and patiently we bring it back, addressing the mind. Oh, my mind, where are you off to? Why don't you come back and continue our wonderful adventure? But that means we have to take interesting themes. And we have to take different themes at each moment. And all of these themes will lead us to the central entity which sits within us. And when we do that, then nearness becomes oneness. And ultimately we feel that, Lord, you are there. This may be a momentary flash, or it may be enduring. On some days it may be short, on some days it may be longer. We shouldn't worry about it. On some days we may be completely disturbed. On some days the mind is nicely calm. But it all comes back to what is happening outside of those sacred, intimate areas that we call meditation, prayer, etc., which is primarily a listening thing. There should be no effort. It should be an effortless thing. It should be a kind of letting go. And japa is a necessary component of it, a kind of preparation for it. So we have to get ourselves into the sacred mood, which becomes uplifting. Many people use music for it, so be it. Music, chanting before your meditation, and even after your meditation could be there. Chanting could be there. Chanting of mantras could be there. Singing could be there. If you're on your own, there's no need to feel that you are under criticism as an opera singer or something like that. The kinesthetic movement you can have the freedom to do anything you like, because in these moments there are only two entities that exist: you and your beloved, you and the divine. And of course, in meditation, certain physical posture must be there for certain useful reasons, not only to keep yourself alert and awake, but also to allow the body to become a channel of spiritual reflection as well. So if you study and you go for meditation, Raja Yoga, I always recommend. The useful chapter is there on the first steps, burning incense, for example, in the morning, in the evening. If you don't like that, and it becomes, you get some sinus difficulties from it, then at least you light an electric candle, something like that. I'm in favor of that. And you sit there, and all the ritual that you do is designed to rally around the mind and bring your attention there. But then in your waking life, what should you do? You should be moderate, says this 6th chapter, the Bhagavad Gita on meditation. You should be moderate in your food. You shouldn't overeat. You shouldn't undereat. You shouldn't sleep too much. You shouldn't sleep too little. You should be balanced in your physical and mental activities, both of them. You should be aware of this catchphrase, work-life balance has to be there. Even balanced in not too much leisure, not too little leisure either, but have leisure, for goodness sakes. And so absolute freedom is our goal, actually. Nirvana, if you like, absolute freedom. But peace really is beyond the range of all the senses and our experiences. It can be felt in the purified intellect. So our job is to purify that component. Don't think that the intellect is intellectual. These are different terms. We're using the term buddhi, and that is that entity that most reflects this divine within you. Most reflects the consciousness and intellect and intelligence that is there inherent in you as your own internal nature. But crucially, the scope of illumination is indicated by, if you read this chapter, verses 29, 30, 31, all beings are seen in this divine self, or God, and the self in all beings. And all beings are also seen in the personal God. And the personal God is seen in all beings. And that requires some conviction, imagination, and feeling, because that feeling will express itself as love and compassion. So a person who practices that, spiritual practitioner, will always abide in the divine. whatever the outward way of life may be, whether it is clerical work, whether it is business work, whether it is laboratory work, whether it is internet work, whatever it is. And then we go with this word work, we can easily do away with. Because when we take work as worship, then we take delight in it, regardless of what it is, whether it's sweeping the streets, or washing the dishes, or cooking the food, or whether it is doing the assigned professional work that is in our area at this moment in time. And that means that a ruler, for example, when illumined, will also remain a saintly ruler. And we have an example of that in the royal sage King Janaka, who was busier than anybody. So a person like that, you regulate your actions knowing that what is pain and pleasure for one person will be pain and pleasure for all others also. And you'll be established what? In a unity of the self, because it is not a unit of self exclusively in you, it is present everywhere, in everything. And you'll be considered, therefore, as having made a spiritual breakthrough, and you'll have an element of peace of mind. Systematic practice is required. Thorough dispassion. If you have these two, then mastery will be achieved. So we have to take comfort from these scriptural verses, verses that I have kind of summarized and put in my own words as a commentary to this 6th chapter based on meditation. Because in order to meditate successfully, the rest, the 99.999% of our day, has to be thoroughly delightful. A thorough joy on the basis that this entity that you call the Divine Self or God is sitting right where we sit. And every time you breathe, you're breathing this in, and every time you breathe out, you're breathing it out. And every movement of a finger is because of its divine presence. Now we have to learn to register that nicely and get into the habit of tuning ourselves in continuously to the glory of this divine self that we call God. And it should be a delightful exercise, but feeling is involved. We have to rally around our emotions. It's not just a head trip or an intellectual exercise. Emotion, it has to be rallied. The emotion has to be rallied. Even in a jnana yogi, who will say, all this devotion and so on and so forth for God, yes, we put it to one side. All I want to know is, I want to know by a process of elimination, what is the reality, what is the truth? It comes with the opposite side of it, the non-negation side, the assertion side that says, this permanent entity is actually continuously present and is flowing through all hands, all eyes, all heads. And they also will get a joy from this. So the symptom of not attuning the mind to this will be depression of the mind, sadness, fear, doubt, anxiety. All of this will come, and we know why it comes. And the adjustment is up to you, really. So I hope I answered some of your questions. I think it may be enough for you to think about. And practice, more than practice. All right. Well, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.